Smiling Friends is probably the most unhinged, innovative, surreal, and intelligent show in animated television history. That's why I have good faith that the upcoming release of Season 3 is going to continue to break all the rules of animated comedy. Season 3 of the Adult Swim smash hit is on its way on October 5th, and expectations are very high for the Smiling Friends gang. At first glance, it looks like a simple animated sitcom about two employees, Pim and Charlie, who work at a company whose mission is just to make people smile. But almost instantly, it becomes clear that this isn't another cookie-cutter adult cartoon with pop culture jokes and crude gags. Instead, Smiling Friends has carved out a reputation for tearing apart the rulebook of animated comedy and stitching it back together in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow always do. I expect Season 3 to be much of the same, and maybe even push boundaries harder with a bigger budget and more elaborate animation techniques. Smiling Friends' relationship with tone is an area that sets it apart from most other shows. Most comedies stick to a single tonal lane. They may be lighthearted, they may be biting satire, or they may even be dark comedies, but rarely do they swing wildly between all the extremes. Smiling Friends has no fear of whiplash in that department. Take the Halloween episode in Season 1. Pim is excited about dressing up for the holiday and the festivities that will follow, but in a matter of minutes, we're in a nightmare hellscape filled with grotesque creatures, tragedy, and an act of shocking violence playing with deadpan absurdity, all before everything's totally fine again. And somehow, someway, it still feels cohesive. This willingness to destabilize the audience is groundbreaking because it forces viewers to stay on the edge. You don't know what you're about to see next, and that sense of instability has become part of the humor itself. Comedy here isn't just about the punchlines, it's more focused on disorientation, tension, and the cathartic release when absurdity collides with sincerity. More on that in a minute, though. You could also take Season 2's episode about imaginary video game character Gwimbly. On the surface, it's a parody of video game mascots and the endless cycle of remasters, reboots, and nostalgia exploitation, but instead of limiting itself to a straightforward parody, the episode spirals into a disturbing exploration of addiction, bodily decay, and failure. Gwimbly starts as a joke character. He's a send-up of the gaming industry's shallow mascots, but the narrative unravels into a grotesque tragedy that's both unsettling and kind of hilarious. What other show would take a parody character and push it totally into existential despair? That's what separates Smiling Friends from other comedies. It doesn't settle for lampooning a target. It uses parody as a springboard into darker, stranger territory that leaves a lasting impression. So much so that fans created their own imaginary lore for Gwimbly games they pretended to have grown up on playing PS1. That episode is also a great example of Smiling Friends' willingness to be experimental with visual representation. And while most adult animated series choose a consistent art style for budget and brand identity reasons, Smiling Friends deliberately refuses to stay put. Episodes frequently shift between traditional 2D animation, crude flash sequences, unsettling realistic renders, claymation, stop-motion, rotoscoping, and even live action. Every episode is different from the next, and these stylistic shifts aren't gimmicks, they're used to enhance the surreal tone of the series. For example, when a character breaks down emotionally, the art might suddenly snap into hyper-realistic detail, making the moment both grotesque and also oddly affecting. When a gag needs to push into absurdity, the animators will distort proportions, they'll change frame rates, or suddenly cut to live action for a jarring laugh. By constantly playing with its own visual identity and its own rules, the show mirrors the instability of its world and the characters in it. And this level of stylistic variety is groundbreaking because it treats animation not as a static medium, but more as an ever-malleable toolkit for storytelling. Every episode is a chance to surprise the viewer visually as well as narratively. And a big part of how it has changed the game in all of this is its integration of shock humor. I like to say that Aqua Teen Hunger Force walked so that Smiling Friends could run in this department. Many animated comedies go for quick gags, witty dialogue, or shock humor, but Smiling Friends finds laughs in the awkward silence, in weird, crazy facial expressions held just a beat too long, or casual dialogue, extremely casual dialogue, as other characters simultaneously crash out. There's a blend of anti-humor, absurdism, and traditional jokes, creating a unique comedic rhythm that sets the show apart. It's totally different because it challenges the very definition of what's actually funny. Sometimes the joke isn't that something is hilarious necessarily, it's that it's so strange you don't know how else to react but to laugh at it. And creators Michael Cusack and Zach Hadel are willing to shock fans too. It's a smart show that embraces a challenge. Remember the Smiling Friends Go to Brazil episode? It was promoted as a holiday special, but instead, it ended up being a real-time 11-minute trip through an airport that bears resemblance to Seinfeld's Chinese restaurant episode, rather than a traditional episode joke tee-up format. You're waiting for the joke to actually hit, and then suddenly at the end you realize the entire concept was the joke. Not many other shows are afforded the opportunity to do an experiment that way, but Smiling Friends has already earned that equity. Every episode is unpredictable in that sense, and they require you to pay attention to small details that set up at the beginning of an episode that normally you'd dismiss, but they end up being a punchline in the end. Like in Season 1's Frowning Friends episode, we get an all-too-real casual conversation between Charlie and Pim about the Renaissance men coming to town. We have no idea who these people are. It's just thrown out there, casually mentioned, and then it's dropped. And the next thing you know, at the very climax of the episode, these irreverent characters show up and they deliver the biggest laugh of the day. And that's impressive when you combine it with the show's ability to blend emotion within its characters as well. Beneath all the absurdity, there's often a vein of sincerity that sort of sneaks up on you. Pim's relentless optimism isn't a gag, it's a window into how some people cope within a chaotic world. Charlie's cynicism isn't just sarcasm, it's the perspective of someone worn down by absurdity and unable to trust happiness. Even side characters often reveal surprising depth. Take Mr. Frog, for example. He's a loud, abrasive, and absurd character, but his arc is essentially about a washed-up entertainer trying to stay relevant while spiraling into self-destruction. It's funny, but it's also kind of tragic, and that mix is what makes him endearing. Innovation here comes from refusing to treat characters as disposable gag machines, and instead, the show invests just enough emotional weight into them that the audience can care, even while laughing at the insanity going on around them. That's a rare balance in animation, and it's part of what gives Smiling Friends its staying power. So as we look forward towards Season 3, the big question is whether this innovation can actually continue. And the preview suggests new grotesque characters like Silly Samuel, plots involving supernatural elements like spirit gems and witches, and even bigger swings in animation style. But what really matters is how the show uses these elements. If it simply tries to top itself with more outrageous designs and more shocking twists, it risks slipping into self-parody, something that The Simpsons and Family Guy did. The innovation of Smiling Friends has never been solely about pure shock. It's that interplay of absurdity, sincerity, and experimentation. Season 3's opportunities lies in deepening that interplay. Imagine an episode that takes the grotesque design philosophy of Silly Samuel and uses it to explore themes of insecurity, respect, and identity. Imagine a story arc that threads surreal fantasy tropes into the everyday mundanity of trying to make someone smile. Imagine a full episode that experiments with one single art style like rotoscoping or live action to immerse the audience in an entirely new comedic environment. They're not gimmicks, they're extensions of what the show already does best, and it treats those styles with respect and exploration. And there's also potential in expanding the emotional range of the supporting cast. Season 3 could explore Alan and Mr. Boss not just as incompetent authority figures, but as people grappling with absurd systems they barely control. And I know I keep saying absurd, but that's what this show is grounded in. Season 2 already teases with its standalone Alan episode, which ended up being a fan favorite and one of mine as well. Gleb could become more than a strange background creature. He could embody a completely different perspective on, say, happiness. They're Smiling Friends after all. Even background characters could become vehicles for emotional resonance, just as Gwimbly did. By mining its ensemble for more depth, the show can innovate not just visually and structurally, but narratively as well. Reality is, unlike many shows that find success and get comfortable, it doesn't appear to be that way at all for Smiling Friends. The show's already been renewed for several more seasons, but the creators aren't content with that. They're willing to step outside the comfort zone, try new techniques, and keep viewers on their toes as to having no idea what to expect with each passing episode. And that makes a show unmissable. That's just something that not a lot of animated shows do currently, or frankly have ever done. It's the same quality that made early South Park episodes so special, and Smiling Friends has taken that idea to entirely new heights. In the end, the reason Smiling Friends feels so groundbreaking is that it treats comedy as a playground where no rules are sacred. It embraces crazy visuals, tonal instability, anti-humor, and sincerity all at once. It doesn't care if a moment is scary, sad, or confusing as long as it actually evokes a reaction. That willingness to destabilize and reinvent is what sets all of this apart. As long as Season 3 remembers that its innovation comes not from shock for shock's sake, but from the creative collision of absurdity and humanity, it's going to continue to break animated comedy wide open. What are you looking forward to in Season 3? Let us know in the comments below.